Welcome, Croeso. Thank you for listening to my presentation today. I hope you enjoy. Let me first of all introduce myself. I'm Mirain and I'm a MSc Psychotherapy and Counselling student at Bangor University. And today I will be discussing my research progress. The research is a work in progress, but I'm nearly finished. Therefore, today I will be exploring the data and research I've already discovered and also mention areas of the research I will be developing before finishing the project. Research. Investigating stigma toward mental illness. The barriers of and attitudes towards mental health stigma in higher education students. So why did I decide to do the research? Being brought up in a farming community has been one of the greatest gifts I've had. It's provided me with passion, respect, responsibility, and offered me loads of room for adventure and play throughout my childhood. It's also shown me that talking about mental health isn't normal and that people should get on with it. The implications of this is that people tend to hide their real feelings, and this is where the stigma comes from. It's very interesting learning more about the stigma, as I was learning so much with my fellow Bangor students. Talking about mental health was a normal conversation, and this was so nice to have. It showed me that it might be my old-fashioned and traditional culture, and I wanted to know if other students were experiencing the same. Therefore, I decided to study the impact of stigma as a barrier to access mental health service from a Bangor University perspective. What current research is in the field? The refined search in the area resulted in 155 articles. In order to assess which articles were relevant, further inclusions and exclusion criteria were set out. For an example, articles that included the general public's perceptions and attitudes towards mental health were included, and only primary research articles were used. 12 articles matched the criteria. So what was the findings of the literature? The literature reviewed suggests that the way in which the general public perceives people with mental health problems depends on their diagnosis. Those with schizophrenia are seen as dangerous and unpredictable. People with alcohol and drug addictions are not only seen as dangerous, but the public also blame them for their addiction. There still seems to be a general consensus that anyone with mental illness is unreliable, especially in terms of looking after children. Many believe having a mental illness reduces intelligence and the ability to make decisions. Discrimination and stigma has also been linked to ignorance, and studies show that the majority of the public have limited knowledge of mental illness, and the knowledge they do have is often factually incorrect. Many still believe that schizophrenia means having a split personality. In addition, many do not understand the difference between mental illness and learning disabilities, and this is still a common misconception that those with depression can snap out of it. There was some indication that public opinion had become more positive, suggesting that greater tolerance and understanding towards mental illness than in previous years. However, these findings should be interpreted with caution. Research found huge disparities between the views that public expressed in surveys and the actual behaviour as experienced or witnessed by service users and providers. So why does it need to be researched? I feel like there's always places to learn and things to learn about new things, and I feel like stigma is such an important aspect within mental health to try and change. While much research has been carried out to explore the stigma of mental health, future research should explore the experiences of service users to understand and measure the impact that stigma has on their lives. This in turn could help to shape interventions and policies for improved legislations to help stop the discrimination faced by those with mental illness. So what is stigma? Stigma, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is defined as a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstances, quality, or person. Stigma is beliefs and attitudes often derived from media or those around us. Stigma is based on negative views of people simply because they are seen as belonging to a particular group. Stigma often results in fear of members of the stigmatized group, often based on ignorance and lack of understanding. Stigma consists of three different elements. These are the problem of knowledge, which is ignorance, the problem of attitude, which is prejudice, and the problem of behaviour, which is discrimination. So what is stigma within mental health? Stigma results in discrimination against the stigmatized group and can lead to verbal and physical abuse. In Research Minds survey, 90% of people with mental health illness reported they had experienced stigma, and this is shocking to learn. So how does stigma impact services? The public stigma attached to having a mental illness is not only the type of stigma that inhibits the decision to seek therapy, there is also a public stigma associated with seeking professional service, separate from the public stigma associated with mental illness. With this stigma, what one suffers from is less important than the simple behaviour of seeking psychological help, whether this is from a chronic or diagnosable mental disorder or for processing the death of a loved one. Simply seeking professional psychological help appears to carry its own mark of stigma. Research. After analysing research within the field, there is a lack of studies that particularly looks at the stigma as a barrier of mental health for students. Therefore, I decided to investigate stigma towards mental illness. But how will I do this? I decided to conduct a questionnaire that would look at students' perspective, knowledge, experiences, attitudes of mental illness to try and gain a greater understanding of stigma, if it's still a barrier or not. Therefore, after collecting the data, I went on to conduct tests in order to find out more. Key goals were: the first hypothesis were there will be a correlation between mental health understanding and attitudes towards mental health service and the surrounding stigma as a barrier to access service. My predictions. For this goal, my prediction was that people who have good understanding of mental health will have a better and positive attitude towards mental health service. I also predicted that people who have a positive attitude towards mental health service have less stigma towards the service. So what did I find out then? I conducted correlation tests. These set out the results of the questionnaires, initially to determine whether correlation exists between students' mental health understanding and attitudes towards mental health service, and secondly, surrounding stigma as a barrier to access service. Results revealed a significant relationship between understanding of mental health and attitudes of mental health. I went on to test the correlation between understanding of mental health and embarrassment. Results revealed no significant relationship between mental health understanding and feelings of embarrassment, which is the stigma. I also tested the correlation between understanding of mental health and shame and embarrassment. Results revealed there was no significant correlation between understanding and shame. Results show no significant correlation between understanding and embarrassment. There was a significant positive correlation between feelings of shame and embarrassment. What else did I find out? So the second hypothesis was People who have identified as having or had a mental health disorder and have had previous experience of counselling will report more positive attitudes on mental health service and less stigma. My prediction was that people who has or are currently in counselling will be more positive of mental health services and have less stigma. What was the result? I did an ANOVA test. The test attitude towards mental health, which is the dependent variable. The independent variable were mental health disorders and counselling experience. A 2.2 ANOVA between subject was conducted to test the potential interaction between the variables. The results showed mental health diagnosis did not significantly affect attitudes. Counselling experience was not significantly affected attitude scores, and there was no significant interaction between diagnosis and counselling experience, which you can see here from the graph. So what does the findings mean? I found the findings quite interesting, to say the least, and not what I was expecting. I was expecting that people who have or had currently counselling experience will have a more positive attitude towards mental health service. So what does this mean? This could suggest that not everyone is benefiting from mental health service. So what could be done to dig deeper? What could service change? What could counselling change? And this will be my next step in looking at these in the questionnaires. What other variables are impacting stigma? I aim to explore these further. What are the factors involved that reduced mental health stigma? And I will analyse these findings by looking at the questionnaire data. What data were significant? There was a positive correlation between feelings of shame and embarrassment. Why is mental health still something people are embarrassed, ashamed of? In a world where there's so many people struggling, especially during the pandemic, why is this still an issue? And what can be done to reduce this? Limitations. Can people be honest, open in a questionnaire? Interview could have enhanced the research by offering an explanation and a trustworthy relationship. Could the effect of COVID be a limitation? Sample size. More samples could have offered more insights into different kind of barriers people are experiencing. Looking at different cultures could have been interesting as well. Because I haven't finished the research project in its fullness, my aim is to develop the research by completing more tests in order to explore different explorations of the data. The plan is to do a multi-regression. This will allow me to estimate how a dependent variable, which is attitudes, changes as the independent variable understanding change. Multiple linear regression will offer an estimate of the relationship between the independent variables and dependent variable. I also intend to look at the people who have had or currently in counselling in order to test their attitude towards the service, this through correlation tests. Take-home message. Talk openly about mental health, such as sharing on social media. Educate yourself and others. Respond to misperceptions of negative comments by sharing facts and experiences. Be conscious of language. Remind people that words matter. Show compassion for those with mental illness. Be honest about treatment. Normalise mental health treatment, just like other healthcare treatment. Speak out against stigma. Diolch o galon. Thank you for listening.